And do I need to start again? I'm sorry. No, okay. And my name is Mark Tony. I serve as chair of the Audit Committee. And what I'd like to do is to ask, just ask each member of the Audit Committee, each trustee, State Bar trustee who's a member, to just say hello, introduce themselves so that you know who they are. And I will start by calling on Ray, Trustee Buenaventura.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, my name is Ray Buenaventura. I've been on the State Bar for maybe a little over a year now, and I'm the Chief Public Defender of Lake County. Thank you.
Great. I'd like to call on Trustee Huser.
Hi, I'm Mary Huser. I've been on the Board of Trustees for, about 6 months now. And I am an in-house lawyer at Airbnb.
Thank you. Trustee Chen.
Hi, I'm Hyland Chen. I've been on the board since around 2017. As an appointee of the California Supreme Court, I'm the co-managing partner of Munger, Tolles & Olson in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Trustee Barahona.
Hey everybody, my name is Patricia Barahona. I go by Patty, they, them, she, her pronouns. I've joined the State Bar a few months ago, and I am the CEO of Youth Leadership Institute, a youth development nonprofit.
Thank you. Trustee Stevens.
Hello, I'm Mattias Stevens. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a shareholder at Littler in San Diego, and I've been practicing law for over 30 years and teaching at UCSD for over 25. I've been on the board for all of 2 minutes, I think. Well, maybe 2 months. And I look forward to working with everybody.
And Mark Tony, chair of the Audit Committee. I've served on the board for a little over 3 years. I use he, him pronouns. And my day job is I serve as executive director of TURN, the Utility Reform Network. So what I would like is for Audit Committee Coordinator Liz Isakaya to call the roll, please.
Got it. Barahona,
Present.
Buenaventura,
Present.
Chen,
Present.
Huser,
Present.
Stevens,
Present.
Tony.
Present.
Quorum is established.
And if I'm not mistaken, not only do we have quorum, but we have 100% attendance today. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. I want to thank everybody. Really appreciate it. So next up is call for public comment. And I'm going to, first of all, we're going to call on people who have signed up. Now, if you're on Zoom, you should be able to have a little hand icon, locate a hand icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. And if you're calling in by phone, you can get in the queue by pressing *9, okay? And that would alert the staff that you'd like to make a public comment. We really appreciate public comment. We limit it to 3 minutes so we can give everybody the chance who wants to address the Audit Committee to do so. And what I have is the first speaker who has signed up in advance is Todd Hill. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Todd Hill to make your comments.
You are now being unmuted.
Thank you, Chairman Tony. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Audit Committee. My name is Todd Hill, and today I'm speaking to you to raise a critical concern that affects not just myself, but potentially many others who rely on the integrity and efficacy of the State Bar's mechanisms for accountability and oversight. Many of you are personally aware of my longstanding issues with the People's College of Law and my attempts to bring that institution into compliance. Specifically today, I wish to discuss the apparent state of the State Bar's whistleblower program. Silence is the enemy of justice, yet your whistleblower program appears to muzzle the very voices it seeks to amplify. This program, demonstrated by the 78 cases reported presented for review and the single instance of referral as it stands, does not embolden genuine reporting, nor does it appear to shield whistleblowers from the storms of retribution. It presents a facade, perhaps unintentionally, that discourages the very act of whistleblowing, suggesting that fears of retribution might outweigh the promise of protection. This program, in its silence, whispers a warning. Proceed with caution. Whistleblowing mechanisms are fundamental to any organization's ethical framework, designed to protect the institution and its stakeholders by ensuring transparency and accountability. However, the design and implementation of the State Bar's whistleblower program raised serious concerns about its effectiveness and, frankly, its sincerity as a tool for justice and integrity. From a critical viewpoint, the program structure does not seem to encourage genuine reporting or safeguard whistleblowers against potential backlash. Instead, it appears to operate within a framework that could deter potential whistleblowers, possibly due to fear of retribution or the belief that their concerns will not be taken seriously or acted upon meaningfully. The effectiveness of a whistleblower program is not just in its existence, but in its design, implementation, and the faith stakeholders have in its process and outcomes. When a program lacks transparency, robust protection for whistleblowers, and a clear, actionable pathway for the investigation and resolution of complaints, it risks being perceived as a sham, a token gesture, rather than a serious commitment to ethical standards and accountability. For an organization as crucial as the State Bar, which upholds the standards of the legal profession and protects the public's interests, the stakes are too high for the whistleblower program to be anything less than exemplary. The potential disconnect between the program's intended purpose and its perceived efficacy can undermine trust not only in the program itself, but in the organization at large. Therefore, I urge the Audit Committee to undertake a comprehensive review of the whistleblower program. It is imperative to assess its design and implementation critically, identify shortcomings, and implement reforms that will ensure the program is robust, effective, and truly serves its purpose, promoting transparency, accountability, and integrity within the State Bar and among its
Let's give Todd a few more a few seconds just to finish his comments.
I've asked him.
Okay. Yeah, let's just give people just a couple seconds to wrap up. I'll let you know when. Thank you. Could you please let me know if we have other people who would like
May I
to?
finish? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
He's
Is it possible?
Just a few seconds. Please do, Todd.
Okay, thank you very much for the extra time. So I was really just wrapping up with my suggestion that you undertake a comprehensive review of the whistleblower program and understanding that, quite frankly, it has been designed by you all who are experts in the field and of extreme competence. It's really important that this program protect those who courageously come forward with concerns and uphold the values and standards that the legal profession and the public rightfully expect from you all. Thank you for the extra time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Can we go to the next person who would like to make public comment, please?
That concludes public comment for those who signed up in advance, and there isn't anyone from the remote attendees that, or actually, no, we have someone. Nope, no, they removed their hand. Okay, they raised it again. One moment. Rhonda Kennedy.
Please.
Start this up again. She's been unmuted.
There, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Rhonda. Thank
All
you.
right. Good afternoon. This is my first time attending any of the trustee board meetings or making comments. And I thought, as a member of the bar and that affects me, I just went through a grueling process and I saw so many flaws in the process from an attorney's perspective. And I understand the bar is there mainly to protect the public, but also as a member of the bar, I feel like I don't have a voice. And surprisingly, there's a lot of members of the bar who feel the same way. I found that after going through my own ordeal. And then looking at the structure and looking at how the board of trustees are appointed, being a politician myself, I started looking at it and saying that I don't think the members actually have representation. So I've been on a process of contacting the local legislators and assembly and Senate members and requesting that the bar is requesting more money to increase the bar dues of $150. And I would be more than happy to pay that if the members actually had 2 trustees that are elected by the members, to expand the trustees to 15 instead of 13, allowing 2 extra trustees to be appointed or elected by the members. That way, we feel that we have some type of representation on the board. And I also utilize the whistleblowers program for an investigator, and I'm waiting to see what the outcome is. I did file a claim for damages. I'm also filing a 42-1983 claim, but I'm not the only attorney that feels this way. There's a disconnect between the members and the state bar, and I think with the distrust of what the fiasco with Tom Girardi and the witch hunt that the investigators are going on now to try and fill that quota to look like we're doing something. Well, Tom Girardi was the problem. We weren't the problem. That I think that there's a disconnect. There's a distrust. A lot of attorneys don't come forward, but we talk to each other. So that's my comment, food for thought. I did research everyone on the board, and looking at them, I see a lot of them was community advocates and nonprofits. So I know there's compassion there, and there's a balance of discipline versus justice. And last thing, I was actually felt like a slave to a client that owed me $115,000. And every time I try to get off their case, they threaten to file a bar complaint. That is the climate that the bar is creating. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Rhonda. Do we have anybody else who has signed up or who has raised their hands?
No, we do not.
Okay. I really, really appreciate both Rhonda and Todd for participating in public comment today. I will note that Todd submitted a 5-page written comment, which I found useful, and I encourage people who have comments to not only speak during public comment, but to submit them in writing. It gives us a little bit more time to review them and think about what it is you have to say. I read that very carefully, all 5 pages. So I do want to acknowledge and appreciate that. All righty, so let's go on. The next item is the chair's report. I don't have a specific chair's report. I will make comments as the meeting goes on topics that I have interest in. So with that dispense, I'd like to move to the minutes. We have before us the approval of the January 8, 2024 open session minutes. That was the last time we met together. And first thing I'd like to ask if anyone has any typos or modifications to correct, make sure we had the right people there, the votes were correct, stuff like that. Any comments? Corrections? Hearing none, I would appreciate and entertain a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Trustee Buenaventura and seconded by Trustee Chen. May we have a roll call, please?
Verona,
Abstain.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Chen,
Aye.
Huser,
Aye.
Stevens,
Abstain.
Tony,
Aye.
4 ayes, 0 noes. Minutes are adopted.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the best practice that I also do, that when I am not at a meeting, I abstain from the vote on the minutes of the meeting. I do acknowledge that, and I think that's the best practice. Thank you very much, trustees. So the next item is a consent agenda item. It is approval of Q4 2023 Board and Management Travel Expense Report. I'm going to first ask if there are any questions that anyone has. If there are not, hold on. Get to the item on the agenda. I do have a question. I probably asked it before, but I can't always remember. So the attachments have 3 categories. And the first is Executive Board of Trustee travel expense. And I just want to confirm that these are, as it states, reimbursements, right? The person, the employee is on a work-related travel or meeting. They use their own personal credit card, then they submit for reimbursement. Is that correct?
Mark, in the process of me getting promoted, I missed the first part of your question. I know you were talking about the adjustments and reimbursements. Would you mind
Of course.
letting me know your question again?
So my question is, in the in this consent item, which is about credit cards, basically, okay?
Mhm.
There are 3 attachments. First one is Executive Board Trustee expense. And it says it's an expense report reimbursement only. And I just want to confirm that each of these employees used their own personal card. They submitted reimbursement, and that's what this is telling us.
Correct. For attachment A is that. There's also the option, some executives have P cards, and the attachment B, that would be anything purchased through P card, but attachment A, that's correct. It is reimbursement to them of expenses incurred in their travels.
Excellent, excellent. I want to know what a P card was. I don't know what a P card is.
A P card is our purchase card. It's our company card, if you will. We call it a P card, but it's purchase card.
Very good, very good. So those are cards that are issued to senior executives. That's fine. I have no issue. And then the final one, which is Executive Board of Trustees direct bill travel expenses, like, I'm on there, for instance, okay? That means these are purchased directly by the state bar, okay? For the travel of trustees and others to, for instance, board meetings, and that's what that indicates.
Correct. And these are done through our travel website.
Okay, great.
Direct bill.
Those are my only questions. The numbers look good. I appreciate having this level of detail, especially in this day and age where you open up the newspaper and you keep reading articles about people using credit cards. This gives me a lot of, organizational credit cards. This gives me a lot of confidence that this is being tracked carefully. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion for the consent, to adopt the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, trustee Buenaventura.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, trustee Barahona. May I ask for a roll call, please?
I need to pull up the resolution for you.
Oh, please do. Thank you.
Can you all see it?
Yes, we can now. All right, we have the motion has been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote?
Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Chen,
Aye.
User,
Aye.
Stevens,
Abstain.
Tony.
Aye.
5 ayes, 0 noes. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Well, the next item on our agenda, we're moving to the business agenda now, is, let me make sure I have this, approval of the 2024 Audit Committee Work Plan and Calendar. And I believe we're going to have a little presentation, yes?
Yes, we will.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Nolan, and I will be briefly presenting the draft 2024 Audit Committee Work Plan. Members of the committee are encouraged to provide input on additional topics that could be included in the plan and any other improvements that could guide the work of the committee, as well as advance the State Bar strategic plan. I'll pull the item up on the screen so everyone sees what we're working with here. Can everyone see my screen?
I can see it. Can you make it a tiny bit larger, please? Perfect. Great.
Okay. So the prior audit committee work plan covered an 18-month period between 2022 and 2023. But over the years, the audit committee work plan has varied in its scope, meaning the number of months that have been included in the work plan has varied. So including just 2024 in this plan may allow for greater flexibility as the committee acclimates to the updated meeting schedule. Since the 2022 to 2023 work plan, 2 items have been added. First, the Whistleblower Anti-Retaliation Program reporting, which you'll hear more about today. And second, the committee's annual review of its work plan. Adding the work plan as an annually recurring item would ensure that the committee has a set time to discuss its upcoming work and reflect on the previous year's work. Following the audit committee's acceptance of the work plan, the plan would go to the board executive committee for approval. So I'll direct your attention to attachment A, and I'll scroll down here.
Thank you.
So this is the proposed calendar. The calendar reflects the approximate schedule of audit committee meetings, which in 2024 are planned approximately 10 days before the regular Board of Trustees meetings. The calendar also gives a high-level overview of what the committee has reviewed in January for members who had not yet joined the committee, and the types of work that is upcoming for committee review. All of these have been coordinated with State Bar staff. And then scrolling down through this to attachment B. Attachment B includes the substantive work plan, which outlines the committee's charge and activities. So as you'll see, each work plan item is aligned to an existing strategic plan goal, strategy, and implementation step. The work plan items also contain brief descriptions, approximate timelines for completion, and the approval process for the items. I'd like to call your attention to that some work plan items will have multiple parts. So for example, the review of audited financial statements will include a report of the receipt of funds from the Legal Services Trust Fund, and will now include an update from the Office of Access and Inclusion on their work to date to monitor the grants, which is consistent with existing statute. I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the work plan.
Floor is open.
Thank you. I just had one quick question. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It feels pretty comprehensive. Just from the review of the audited financial statements due to the legislature on May 31st, that is following the April 1st reports. And I'm curious, is that purposeful, and should some of that I guess my question is, would the legislature benefit from receiving some of those audited financials tied to that April 1 report? And maybe Leah, you can explain this one to us, or if anybody on the team.
So I can start. I'm also promoting Araceli, just as she works on the audited financial statements. So the April report that's due on April 1st, it's a one-time report that's tied to the fee increase. And this is a separate requirement from the audited financial statements, which are due every year. For context, the audited financial statements were previously due in April 30th. Of each year. And then this year, the requirement in statute was changed to May 31st. So Araceli might be able to give more about how those two intersect, but as I understand it, it's two separate bodies of work.
They are two separate, completely separate reports. And sorry, Patricia, I missed part of your question also while I was getting promoted, but yeah, they're two separate reports. Obviously the financial statements is done every year. As Elizabeth said, it was previously due at the end of April, but it's since changed this past year with the new bill signed to the end of May 31st. So they're going to be kept separate.
Although the only thing I would add is that in the April report where we're identifying the funding needed for the fee increase, we are required to outline 2023 actual costs where appropriate. And there we do have a note that those actuals are subject to the completion of the annual financial statement. And then we refer to that due date. So you'll see some cross-reference to it in the fee increase request.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question. Other questions that any trustees may have? If I could ask, Elizabeth, for you to put the attachment A back on screen, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
I appreciate all the information that staff has put together in this item, attachment A in particular. Because what it does is it tells me, for instance, in May, I don't know how we're going to get all this done in 1 hour. And I would suggest that in May we consider 2 hours. The review of the audited financial statements, the Board of Trustees, which is meeting later in May, they have an expectation that the Audit Committee will have done the work of going through it in detail so that the entire board doesn't have to go through it in entire detail. I think this will be the first time we have received a public trust liaison annual report. The procurement disparities analysis is something we'll want to take a look at. And so I would suggest that this would, that this proposed calendar would suggest that May we make an exception and look for 2 hours. If we can get it done in less, that's always great, and I will strive towards that. But I would rather, I have had trustees contact me and say, hey, it's hard when meetings go over the time allotted. It's better to either stick with the plan or to plan better ahead of time. And when you can tell you're going to need more than an hour, to schedule more than an hour. So I'm giving advance notice here that based upon this, I'm going to be looking for 2 hours the next go around in May. So that's the only comment I have. You can take this down, but thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Yes, please, Trustee Chen, please.
I wonder whether it might be a useful exercise, especially I mean, for a number of reasons, we have a lot of new board members. We are in a phase where we want to take the work that the ad hoc committee on accountability and oversight reforms has been doing and really institutionalize it. I wonder whether it might be useful, say, in our July meeting, when we're getting an update from the Office of Compliance on the compliance work plan, to really take a look at sort of topic by topic what it is that's within the charge of the audit committee. I think historically we've been asked to look at our audited financials, right? And I think that there's been an increase in scope to look at things like IT and cybersecurity assessments. I do feel like there's a sort of interesting mix of things that fall within our purview. For, you know, there's a sort of bucket of financials, there's a bucket of sort of internal operations like procurement and, you know, use of the P card and things like that. And then there's a sort of other bucket that we have now, this whistleblower anti-retaliation program, what the Office of Compliance does, making sure that our Form 700 compliance on the part of the board is going well. So there's sort of like conflicts of interest and like board management issues. There's just like a kind of like a mix of topics. And I think we should ask ourselves, like, what is our role supposed to be? What is the proper scope of what we're auditing and looking at? Some of the stuff that the state auditor, you know, the state auditor's recommendations are things that we're looking at, and that touches on various things, right? Like discipline. And so I think it would be useful to look at what it is that we as an audit committee are supposed to be looking at and to organize it by those sorts of topics.
Trustee Chen, I very much appreciate that comment, and I agree completely. If I could ask you to help me out by just sending a quick memo with bullet points that will help me and the staff design that agenda item for July. July is perfect for that. I'd appreciate it a great deal.
Yeah, and curious to hear people's reactions to it too.
Yes, yes. Trustee Barahona.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trustee Chen, for that recommendation. I guess my understanding of it would be then that we're revisiting the audit committee charter to understand both what we are accountable to doing and also assessing what's missing from that. Is that what you're alluding to? I'm trying to catch up.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. I think it's good to look at the charter, and part of it is asking ourselves whether we are actually meeting the charter. Part of it's asking ourselves whether there's aspects that we're not meeting, if the charter is appropriate for what it is we think the audit committee should be doing. And I think maybe as a full board, the board should be considering, like, what's the appropriate role of the audit committee, right? And to the extent to which some of this stuff overlaps with discipline, the extent to which some of the stuff overlaps with finance, I think it would help us as an audit committee do our job better if we worked on clarifying our role.
I think it's a great point. It's become like a lot more than
Yeah.
it was. And I think just kind of understanding that, putting some kind of cohesion around it and making sure that it reflects what you want it to be and the board ultimately.
Thank you. Other comments, reactions, questions? Okay. Well, thank you much. Thank you very much for that. And I do appreciate a little bit of support in identifying what those items are. And that'll be terrific. If there are no more comments or questions, then do we have a resolution we can put up?
We do have a
Yes.
resolution.
Thank you.
Do you see it?
Yes, thank you very much. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2024 work plan and calendar for the audit committee. and as this says. How about we get someone who hasn't introduced a motion before? We can do that.
I
So
would be-
moved.
Thank you, trustee User. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, trustee Stevens. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Chen,
Aye.
User,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 noes. The motion carries.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I think we're moving along okay. Next on the agenda is a report on the State Bar's Whistleblower Anti-Retaliation Program. Who will be presenting on that?
Good afternoon, everyone, Chair and members of the Audit Committee and members of the public. Let me briefly introduce the item, and my colleague from the Office of General Counsel, Shelby King, will be making the detailed presentation. Most of you may recall, we adopted a whistleblower program last year through our collaboration and contracting with the Department of Justice, California Department of Justice. And part of Ad hoc Committee's recommendation was to develop a reporting mechanism, and it thought it would be appropriate to do so through the Audit Committee. And this is the first report that we're presenting to the Audit Committee. There was a brief preview of the statistics at the January's planning session to the board, but this is more detailed. And without further ado, and being mindful of everyone's time, let me turn this over to Shelby King.
Hi, thank you all. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you fine.
So as background, the Board of Trustees approved an interagency agreement with the California Department of Justice for the Whistleblower Anti-Retaliation Program at their May 2023 meeting. The agreement took effect on June 1st, 2023. The program permits individuals who bring whistleblower and whistleblower anti-retaliation complaints against state bar personnel, which includes current and former employees, agents, officers, and members of the Board of Trustees and sub-entities. The DOJ reviews complaints to determine if there is a good faith allegation that state bar personnel engaged in improper governmental activity. So that means that the individuals failed to act competently, ethically, legally, or properly in establishing their duties, and/or that they engaged in whistleblower retaliation. The whistleblower program was placed in the DOJ to ensure that the investigations are truly independent and that the investigations are conducted by a reputable party with extensive experience conducting similar types of investigations. The goal is to increase public trust that whistleblower complaints are taken seriously. Confidentiality and independence are important to ensuring that individuals feel comfortable reporting complaints. After the independent investigation, and if there is a finding of improper governmental activity, then the State Bar will work with the DOJ to review the necessary information and respond appropriately. So the report before you today presents updated statistics on the program. The presentation that Aline mentioned in January included statistics through January 8th, and this report provides updates through February 15th. Since the program started last June, 78 complaints have been received by the DOJ. 72% of those complaints were not allegations of improper governmental activity against state bar personnel. This includes 21 complaints that were against an attorney and not state bar personnel, and those were referred to the Office of Chief Trial Counsel, and 35 complaints that were not allegations of improper governmental activity against state bar personnel or a complaint against a California attorney. 27% of the complaints were against state bar personnel, but were closed after the DOJ analyzed the facts and determined that there were no good faith allegations of improper governmental activity. One complaint did move to the investigation stage, but the complaint was closed after the DOJ determined that there was no finding of improper governmental activity. Since June 1st, 2023, the State Bar has spent $14,875 of the $100,000 that was allocated to the whistleblower program for year one. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Trustee Buenaventura, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you walk me through how a whistleblower could make a complaint? What are the steps and how does this, I guess I want to know just the whole process and how someone is able to make one and how it ends.
Sure. In connection with this program, we actually developed on our website a form that anyone could fill out anonymously, or they could provide their name. And that complaint is automatically then submitted to the DOJ team that reviews the complaints. Does that answer your question, Trustee Buenaventura? And once they receive the complaint, the DOJ team independently reviews the facts. And if there is a contact information available, they'll follow up to get additional information and pursue that investigation further.
So when a complaint is generated, who in the bar has oversight over that complaint? And I mean, is it automatically sent? Is there some screening?
Yes.
Okay.
It's automatically transmitted to the Department of Justice team that reviews and investigates the complaint.
So the bar doesn't review it?
Correct. We don't
it
filter through. Yes, we don't filter through anyone that submits a whistleblower complaint through that portal. That complaint goes directly to the Department of Justice for them to review and determine whether anything further, needs to be investigated or how it should be handled. And this is what, for example, if a complaint is filed and DOJ receives it, and it's actually a complaint against an attorney and should be handled as a disciplinary complaint, that's when they reach out to the Office of General Counsel and would put them in contact with Office of Chief Trial Counsel, and they receive the information so that the Office of Chief Trial Counsel can review that particular complaint.
And what's the process of the person who is the subject of the complaint getting some kind of notice that there is some complaint against them? Is it after the review? Is it immediate once a complaint is generated? How is that known?
I think if the DOJ determines that an investigation is appropriate, then DOJ would directly then contact the individual who is the subject of the complaint. In essence, the Department of Justice runs the investigation, and so they would contact the appropriate witnesses and other individuals that may have pertinent information.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Other questions?
Can you remind me what efforts have been taken to make sure that employees of the State Bar are aware of this whistleblower program and can and should access it, and that it's subject to anti-retaliation policies?
Yes, we sent out a memorandum to all of our staff. We have information available on our intranet that is internal to State Bar employees, and it will also have information available on our website. And retaliation for filing a whistleblower complaint is in fact considered improper governmental activity. So there are strong protections against retaliating against someone who might have filed a complaint.
Good question. Good question. Yes, please, Trustee Barahona.
Elaine, I think you answered this already, but I was reviewing the public comments from Todd Hill, and one of the key concerns was around the State Bar using findings to support their own arguments. But what you just explained is that the Department of Justice would be overseeing this investigation, and therefore the State Bar would not be able to do what is being shared in these comments. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. That's why we developed this program to be, in essence, exist outside of the state bar. And the information goes directly to the California Department of Justice to review, investigate, and respond to appropriately. If there is a finding, for example, out of that investigation, we will receive a notice from the Department of Justice with a corrective action that we would need to address. So the entire program was designed in a way to have an external neutral party that's well qualified in handling these types of complaints to investigate and run the program for the state bar.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
Other questions? This is the time. Yes, please, Trustee Stevens, please.
What have we done to educate the public that this is available?
I think, well, the item was obviously approved at the board meeting in 2023, but we do have a website dedicated on our public facing excuse me. We do have a page available on our website that's publicly available that explains the program and includes the link for filing a complaint. We've also empowered our public trust liaison in case if there are inquiries that he could direct them to that website. If we get inquiries that may qualify for filing a whistleblower complaint, that we direct those individuals to the website and the availability of that program.
And Trustee Stevens, when we first launched this, we did do a kind of a communications campaign, and I just don't have information like at the tip of my fingers about like the frequency with which that campaign is repeated, because often we periodically repeat those.
Thank you, trustees. Other questions? Yes, please, Trustee Chen.
If there is a complaint that results in an investigation and the investigation does not result in a finding of improper governmental activity, is there any other mechanism by which DOJ could provide the state bar with any corrective actions? Because even if something fell short of improper governmental activity, sometimes in the course of these investigations, you find things that could have been done better, controls that could have been tighter, things that come up like that. Is there a way for DOJ to provide that sort of information to the state bar?
Yes, we have a very good working relationship with the DOJ team of attorneys that handles these investigations. And we've made it clear that if there's anything we need to be aware of, should improve on, that we have, that we can have a conversation. We're interested in hearing that so we can implement whatever, if not formally named a corrective action, but improvement in our processes.
That's great.
Thank
and is there a
you.
way to get reporting on sort of, I mean, obviously there's confidentiality around this, but I think I'd be curious to know sort of like, you know, as this program goes on over the years, it might be interesting to know sort of topically, you know, these are the types of complaints that come in, you know, these are the types of issues that get presented.
Sure. In fact, we did talk to them, and it might actually be in our contract that we'd like to learn about trends to the extent we can understand what the trends are, so that we can respond appropriately. This program hasn't been around for a year, so we were hoping to revisit that conversation with them at the 1-year anniversaries, that they have a little bit more information in terms of their experience with us.
That's great, because it may highlight for us, you know, gaps in education and communication, right? Like maybe there isn't a violation, but it could just be a, you know, a perception issue that, or a communication issue that we need to address.
Yeah, and I will say that if, for example, they get a complaint that perhaps needs to be reviewed from like HR perspective or another way, the DOJ will flag that for us and refer it back to us for our own internal investigation.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a good discussion here. Great questions. Especially for an item we're not voting on. But that's good. That's very good. My comment is looking at the number of cases that have been filed, that have been processed independently, which by the way, I think is the right thing to do, that the state bar staff has nothing to do with reviewing whistleblower complaints. I think we did the right thing, but it looks like they're doing so in a very cost-effective manner. If you ask me, could you tell us a little bit about the fee structure?
Sure. Give me 1 second and I'll pull that up. I have it handy. So when the investigation is handled by the Department of Justice attorneys, their blended rate is $220. And the rate for their paralegals is $205. There might be instances where either they have bandwidth issues or they need certain type of expertise and they will need to contract with external firm to conduct the investigation. Those rates will vary, but they will reach out to us so we can confirm, that we're okay with the cost. I believe we have a cap of $500 an hour for those instances, but again, we have flexibility to, approve expenditures beyond that if the circumstances necessitate for them to have external counsel conduct the investigation.
Thank you very much. Aileen, I believe those are very reasonable hourly costs and are more than justified by the work. So this is a discussion only item. We do not have a item for vote. This is something that will recur from time to time in terms of reporting. And anything else before we wrap up and go to our final agenda item? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate Aileen and Shelby, your work and presentation on this. If we could move to Araceli to provide an oral report on the request for proposal for the independent financial audit, I sure appreciate it.
Sure. So this item, I'm going to just cover the high level of the timeline for the request for proposal, the RFP process for our independent auditors. We're currently in a 1-year extension with our former auditor, MGO. So what I did is I worked backwards from when I need approval for the contract, and the board does have to ultimately approve all the contracts. So I need this particular contract to be approved in the September board meeting. And that's because we normally have interim work in Q4. So in order for the auditors to do that, we would need the contract approved by the end of September, or I should say by the September board meeting. So working backwards, the plan is to start the RFP process towards the end of April. And it takes about 2.5 months to do the entire process, from doing the RFP, from submitting it to the relevant firms that we're going to ask to submit a proposal to us for reviews and reference checks and decisions to be made. So I will start the process towards the end of April. And then, like I said, it will take about 2.5 months. There's 3 key dates that the audit committee will be involved. And that'll be, one is reviewing the actual RFP. That'll land around end of April, early May, and also the actual review itself of all the proposals. That's probably the biggest time spent that's going to be required. And then finally, the approval. The audit committee has to approve, or should approve, the contract first before it goes to the board. So I would like some guidance and direction from the audit committee, whether in these 3 key dates that I mentioned, reviewing the RFP, reviewing the proposals themselves, actually ultimately adopting or approving the vendor will be required by the audit committee, but at least reviewing the RFP and the proposals, whether the entire audit committee is going to partake in that, or whether you, Mark, as the audit committee chair, is going to be doing that kind of single-handedly.
I'll tell you what my preference is, and I'd like input. I would prefer one volunteer, one trustee, to work with me on reviewing the RFPs and, basically doing just a little bit of homework in between audit committee meetings. I do not want to spend the entire audit committee going through details. Because I don't think that's a good use of all of our time, but I would appreciate and would feel that it's more accountable if one other person, one other trustee would volunteer. What do I think it means in terms of time? Because that's the question you're asking me. Is it's probably 1 or 2 extra hours a month. Okay. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. It's things take time. Anyone who's currently on this meeting have interest? Yes, Trustee Stevens. That's a yes, yes?
Yeah, I'm a sucker is what that is.
Thank you.
But
thank
it's,
you,
but
thank
truthfully, it's really important work and
you. It is.
making sure we've got the right auditor for the financials is important. So you
Okay.
get me.
Trustee Stevens, bless you. Thank you. And we should be able to do this work in the interim, right? This administrative work. We don't have to do it in public. Help me out, folks. Procedure wise.
I think that's correct.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to be transparent here of what we're planning to do. If there is any issue, I want to make sure we don't got one, or that if we do, we fix it before it happens. Okay. Well, is there anything for the good of the order before we wrap up here?
I just had one thing to go back one step. I'm so sorry, Chair. I think that a lot of what was shared today on the anti-retaliation piece, some of those questions that our Todd Lyle had shared ahead of via public comment were answered for me. And so I have some curiosity if we can bolster the FAQ on our website, because I do think you've answered a lot, Eileen, in that very short amount of time, as I compare to some of the comments that he shared that were answered pretty quickly. And I assume others have those similar questions. Is that something that's possible on your end?
Sure, we will take a look at what is available on the website and we can see where we can improve in the communication and the information that's available. We can do that.
Thank you very much. Do appreciate it. All right. If there's nothing else, I will declare the meeting adjourned, and we're right on time. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day. Bye.
Right.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Take care.